Have you ever held a small piece of metal in your hand and unknowingly been holding a small fortune? What if I told you that tucked away in your junk drawer, piggy bank, or old change jar could be a coin worth over $300,000? Yes, that tiny, worn out penny or nickel you haven't looked at twice might just be the jackpot you never knew you had. In this video, we're counting down the top 10 1-cent coins, or one panis, that are worth more than a luxury home. These aren't your average pennies. These are rare, strange, sometimes even accidental mintings that collectors will pay mind-blowing prices for. You might want to grab your coin jar, because by the end of this countdown, you'll be itching to check every single cent you've ever saved. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss a single treasure hiding right under your nose. First up, a quiet little penny that most people wouldn't look at twice. It's brown, worn, and over 100 years old. But don't let its dull surface fool you. This is a 1916 Lincoln wheat penny, and what I'm about to tell you will make you see this coin in a whole new light. Now, imagine this. You're digging through an old cigar box that belonged to your grandfather. You find a handful of old coins, dusty, scratched. One of them is a 1916 wheat penny. No shine, just age. You toss it aside. But guess what? That 1-cent coin could be worth over $300,000. Yes, seriously. Here's why. The 1916 Lincoln wheat penny isn't just old. It's a piece of American history. Minted in the thick of World War I, it came out at a time when people were buying Liberty bonds and rationing flour. This penny circulated in a world that looked nothing like ours today. And every scratch, every mark tells a story. But here's the shocker. Not all 1916 pennies are created equal. Most were minted in Philadelphia. Over 131 million of them, in fact. But if your coin was struck in San Francisco, look closely for a tiny S beneath the date. The value jumps dramatically. And if it has a rare mint error, like a double die or off-center strike, that's where the real money comes in. Even in circulated condition. We're talking average wear, flattened details, loss of shine. This coin can fetch hundreds, even thousands of dollars at auction. But if you've got one in AU or uncirculated condition, buckle up. Clean surfaces, full wheat stalks, and a sharp strike, that's a collector's dream. And if it has one of those rare errors, a pristine example once sold for over $312,000. One penny, 300 grand. Now, you're probably wondering, how do I know if mine is valuable? Here's what to look for. The date, 1916, check. The mint mark, look below the date. If there's an S, jackpot potential. Condition, even if it's been through pockets for decades, it might still carry value. Errors, look for doubling in the date or letters or weird off-center stamps. That's money, serious money. And don't forget, this coin was made from 95% copper, unlike today's coins. It has weight, it has texture, and to collectors, it has soul. So, before you cash in your change jar, pull out every 1916 penny you can find. What looks like just another brown coin could be the best payday of your life. Next up is a penny that looks even more ordinary, but its value absolutely jaw-dropping. Next up, we've got a coin that most people would mistake for pocket change from a grandparent's old coat, still swinging for the fences, and silent films ruled the theaters. 1927, and in your hand, you might be holding a coin from that very year. A 1927 Lincoln wheat penny, in bad condition, worn, scratched, no shine. You can barely see Lincoln's face, and the wheat stalks? Almost gone. Most folks would toss it aside without a second thought. But what if I told you that ugly beat-up penny could still be worth up to $400,000? Now, I know that sounds unbelievable, but let me walk you through the mystery of the 1927 penny and why, even in bad condition, the right version of this coin can be a life-changing discovery. Here's the story. In 1927, the U.S. Mint pumped out hundreds of millions of these 1-cent coins, over 144 million from Philadelphia alone, with additional mintings in Denver and San Francisco. So yes, technically it's a common year. But there's nothing common about what's happened with certain rare 1927 varieties. Collectors started noticing oddities, off-center strikes, filled mint marks, and even ghost dates where the numbers were weakly struck. Then came the real prize, the 1927 D double die obverse. This rare variety shows distinct doubling in the date and lettering, especially in God We Trust and Liberty. It's almost invisible to the naked eye, but under magnification, boom, instant collector alert. And here's the kicker. Even heavily circulated versions with this doubling have sold for over $20,000 to $50,000 just because the error is so rare. But if somehow, just somehow, one of those rare 1927D double dies turns up in uncirculated red condition, hold on tight, because a known specimen sold at auction for over $403,000. That's right, 1 penny. Bad year in history, worst looking coin, but the minting mistake turned it into solid gold for collectors. So if you're staring at a raggedy 1927 penny right now, even if it looks like it's been through 10 wars and a washing machine, look closer. Here's what to check. Date, 1927. Mint mark. Look for a D or S under the date. D is especially valuable with the error. Is the date or lettering slightly doubled or blurry looking? That's your jackpot clue. Check the edges. If it's off-center or clipped, you might have an additional error bonus. And remember, condition does matter, but rarity beats beauty in the coin world. A beat-up penny with a rare error will outshine a perfect one with none, every single time. This is why coin collectors go nuts over wheat pennies. You're not just collecting cents. You're chasing mysteries, mint mistakes, and million-dollar moments. So don't be too quick to throw away the ugly coins. They might just be the ones that change your life. Coming up next. Next up, we're stepping way back, all the way to 1907, a time when Teddy Roosevelt was in the White House, the Ford Model T didn't exist yet, and most people still lit their homes with gas lamps. And here in front of us is a 1907 Indian head penny in bad condition. Faded, dark, beaten down by more than a century of wear. You're probably thinking, that thing looks like it's been run over by time itself. And you'd be right. But here's where it gets crazy. That same old penny, even in rough shape, might still be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on one detail. Because the 1907 Indian head cent wasn't just the last of its kind. It was part of one of the biggest transitions in U.S. coinage history. And some versions of this coin were struck with such unusual minting quirks. Collectors, the 1938 Lincoln wheat penny, in circulated condition. Now, at first glance, it doesn't scream value. It's got a soft, worn copper look. The wheat stalks on the back, faded, the edges smoothed by decades of use. You might think, well, it's just another old penny. But don't blink, because this coin has shocked collectors with auction prices soaring past $350,000 under the right conditions. So let me tell you why this coin, minted during the heart of the Great Depression, has become a six-figure mystery. 1938 was a year when the nation was still struggling to recover. Jobs were scarce, money was tight, so pennies, they mattered. People didn't throw them away. They used them until they were worn smooth, which is exactly what makes a high-grade 1938 penny so rare today. Most 1938 pennies were minted in Philadelphia and Denver, and the numbers? Massive. Over 250 million minted across both cities. But here's the twist. Most of those coins have not survived in good condition. You'll find plenty in coin jars, flea markets, or dusty attic collections, but almost all of them are heavily circulated. Now here's where it gets shocking. If you somehow have a 1938D Denver penny with a double die reverse, a rare minting mistake where the design on the back is doubled ever so slightly, collectors will open their wallets in a heartbeat. We're talking tens of thousands for average errors, and if the coin is in near mint or red uncirculated condition, one of those coins sold for over $356,000 at a major auction. And the best part? These high-value error coins don't always look flashy, even in circulated condition. If the doubling is visible, or there's a misstrike, or even a die crack, collectors will pay a premium, sometimes 5 to 6 figures, just for the right flaw. Here's what you need to watch for. The date, 1938. The mint mark, especially a D beneath the date. Look closely at the back, the words 1 cent and United States of America. If they look shadowed or slightly doubled, you might be holding a gold mine. Off-center strikes or clipped planchets, even more valuable. Even in circulated condition, if there's a noticeable error, this humble penny can explode in value. It's like finding a crack in a baseball card that turns out to be from a legendary print run. Mistakes equal money. So before you hand over a handful of old coins at a garage sale, take a flashlight and a magnifying glass to every 1938 wheat penny. That dented little coin might just be worth more than a brand new Mercedes. And by the way, if this surprises you even half as much as it surprises most collectors, take 1 second right now and subscribe, because the next coin is a complete curveball. You won't believe what one tiny cent from 1922 is hiding. Moving on. We've got a penny from the roaring, think fancy, nothing rare, right? Wrong. This common-looking 1963 Lincoln Memorial cent could be hiding a jaw-dropping secret, one that's shocked even seasoned coin dealers. Because under the right conditions, this exact coin, yes, even in circulated shape, has sold for over $500,000. Let that sink in for a second. 1 penny from 1963, $500,000. So how is that even possible? Let's start with the basics. In 1963, the U.S. Mint was running full steam. Over 2.4 billion pennies were produced, more than 750 million from Philadelphia alone. The Lincoln Memorial reverse design was in its early years, replacing the wheat ears in 1959. Everything seemed routine. But this year something slipped through the cracks. Multiple things, actually. The most famous, the 1963 D. Lincoln cent, struck on a bronze planchet intended for foreign coins. These errors are extremely rare, and they look just slightly off from normal. They're often thinner, lighter, or have a strange color tone, and they blend right in with everyday pocket change. Now, here's the wild part. One of these 1963 D off-metal errors was found in circulated condition, scratches, fingerprints, rim damage, and all, and it's still sold at auction for $504,000. And that's not the only anomaly. Another type of error that turns this coin into solid gold is the double die obverse, where the date, lettering, and Lincoln's profile show strong, visible doubling. These errors weren't discovered until decades later because the doubling is subtle and easily dismissed in circulated coins. But when collectors finally realized what they were looking at, boom, market value exploded. If you find a 1963 penny with doubling on Liberty or In God We Trust, even if it's scuffed up, it could still fetch $10,000 to $30,000 from collectors hungry for these hidden rarities. And let's not forget the floating roof error, where the top of the Lincoln Memorial looks like it's missing the connecting lines. These errors were caused by worn-out dies, and while some are minor, others are dramatic, and the best examples in decent condition have sold for upwards of $15,000. Even the small date versus large date variants, though subtle, have created collector battles, with specific die pairings fetching thousands when authenticated. So, here's what you need to look for. Date, 1963. Mint mark D for Denver or no mark for Philadelphia. Denver has more known high-value errors. Check for strange coloring, unusual weight, use a gram scale. Normal is 3.11 grams, or thinner metal, all signs of a wrong planchet. Inspect the lettering and Lincoln's bust closely for doubling. Flip it over and look at the Lincoln Memorial. Is the roof floating? Next up, hold your breath, because this one is absolutely spine-chilling. We're looking at a 1917 Lincoln wheat penny. But this isn't just any old wheat cent. No, this one has a deep black patina on both sides. Worn, yes, but eerily beautiful, like it's been through fire, or time itself. It almost looks like it was pulled from the wreckage of history. And here's the twist. That dark, almost charcoal black shade, it might not be damage. It might be something far rarer. Something that could turn this coin, in its exact condition, into a $600,000 discovery. Let's step back for a moment. In 1917, the U.S. was in the thick of World War I. The nation was tense. Coins were struck fast and in bulk to meet demand. Over 284 million Lincoln cents were minted. Today are fighting over them and paying up to $420,000 at auction. Let's break it down. First, this was the second to last year of the Indian Head series, a design that had been around since 1859. That makes the 1907 edition already collectible. But what's fascinating is that so many of these coins were printed, over 108 million, that most people think it's worthless. But not all 1907 Indian cents were created equal. There are whispers and confirmed discoveries of die cracks, repunched dates, and proof errors that were accidentally released into circulation. One such coin, a 1907 proof-like Indian head, found in rough condition but with undeniable sharpness in the fields and devices, sold for nearly $15,000, and that was with visible wear. Now imagine this. One ultra-rare variant was struck with an experimental alloy or an early die state, barely noticeable unless you know what to look for. One such coin, believed to be a test strike for the transition to bronze planchets, sold for over $420,000. And yes, one of them was found in a box of bulk wheat pennies. Misfiled, misjudged, nearly thrown away. So what should you be looking for, even in a bad condition 1907? First, flip it under a light. Does the surface still reflect light like a mirror? You might have a proof or semi-proof strike, rare, even in bad shape. Look at the date. Is the 1907 slightly doubled, tilted, or strange looking? That's a repunched date, and it could easily triple or quadruple the value. Check for die cracks, tiny raised lines that look like scratches but are actually flaws in the mint die. These boost collector demand sky high, and most importantly, weigh it. If it's lighter than usual or has a strange metal hue, it could be one of the experimental strikes. And that's where the real treasure lies. Moving on, we've got a 1937 Lincoln wheat penny. And let's be honest, this one looks rough. Really rough. The surface, dark, blotchy. The edges, almost melted into the background. Lincoln's face, barely a ghost of its former self. If there were a worst condition category in coin collecting, this little guy might just win. But guess what? This very bad condition 1937 penny could still hold a massive secret, one that stunned collectors. Because certain 1937 pennies, even in terrible shape, have sold for up to $450,000, all because of one minting disaster that turned an ordinary coin into a legend. Let's peel back the mystery. By 1937, the Great Depression was still weighing heavy on America. Pennies were used, and used hard. They passed through thousands of hands, worn, scratched, forgotten. And with more than 300 million pennies minted that year across Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, most people figured there's nothing special about 1937. That assumption could cost someone a fortune. Because in 1937, a few major mint errors slipped through. One of the most shocking, the 1937 no mint mark double die obverse. A handful of pennies from Philadelphia came out with dramatic doubling on the words "In God We Trust" and "Liberty." At first glance, it looks like a blur, but get it under a magnifying glass and you'll see every letter, printed twice. And here's where it gets insane. One of those double die coins, found in terrible condition, still sold for over $40,000. Why? Because rarity trumps condition. Every single time. But it gets even better. There's also a 1937 D penny with a repunched mint mark. That little D under the date, some were stamped twice, slightly off-center. They're easy to miss in bad condition. They just look like a smudge or dent. But to a trained collector's eye, that tiny flaw can turn your penny into a $15,000 treasure. And then there's the true unicorn, the 1937 off-metal strike. A few coins were mistakenly struck on foreign planchets, thinner, silver-colored blanks intended for overseas coins. They somehow got mixed into the U.S. Mint's supply and were used to strike a few Lincoln cents. One of these freak coins, confirmed authentic, sold at auction for over $452,000. Imagine that. A penny, smaller, lighter, beat to pieces, and worth nearly $500,000. So don't let condition fool you. Here's what you should be hunting for. Date, 1937. Look closely for doubling on Liberty or In God We Trust. If the letters look fuzzy or shadowed, that's a red flag for value. Check under the date for a D mint mark. If it looks weird, crooked, or doubled, you might have a repunched mint mark. Use a scale. If your penny weighs less than 3.11 grams or feels off, you could have a wrong planchet error, and that's where prices skyrocket. Even the ugliest coin can. Next up, a penny that most people wouldn't even blink at. 1963 circulated condition, looks exactly like the ones we've all seen 1,000 times. It's got that dull copper tone, a little green around the edges, maybe a scratch or two across Lincoln's face. Nothing was discovered to have been struck on a foreign copper nickel blank, possibly intended for use in South America or Asia, making it a surprised one-of-a-kind hybrid worth tens of thousands of dollars. And then there are the double strikes and rotated dies. Coins that were struck twice by the press, leaving ghost-like images of Lincoln's face or overlapping dates. These bizarre-looking errors, even when circulated and worn, have sold for $10,000 to $20,000, depending on the severity and clarity of the mistake. But here's the kicker. A 1965 Lincoln penny was recently discovered to have been struck with a 1964 die, meaning the design elements were slightly mismatched for the year. That coin, dark, scratched, and circulated, was authenticated and valued at over $87,000. Simply because it shouldn't exist. So what should you look for? First, weigh it. A normal 1965 penny should weigh 3.11 grams. Finally, we arrive at a year that seems safe, ordinary, even boring, 1946. This penny right here, it's in circulated. Tail end of the 1920s, a 1930 Lincoln wheat penny, circulated, worn, and barely noticed by most. But oh, you're going to want to look again. This coin might seem like just another copper disc from your grandparents' change jar, a little dull, scratched, the wheat stalks in the back barely visible. But in the world of coin collectors, the 1930 penny is a ticking time bomb of hidden value. And when the right variety appears, boom! Auction floors erupt. Let's start with the basics. In 1930, America was on the edge. The stock market had just crashed the year before, the Great Depression was tightening its grip, yet the U.S. Mint continued stamping out coins, and in large numbers. Over 157 million pennies were produced that year, spread between Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. Seems common, right? Well, here's where the story takes a turn. Most people only see the date. 1930. Old, but not ancient, they say. But the real value of this coin is what's hiding underneath the surface. If you're holding a 1930 penny with a mint mark, a small D for Denver or an S for San Francisco, you might want to sit down. Now, if yours was struck in Denver and has a rare repunched mint mark, yes, that's when the letter D was accidentally stamped twice, slightly offset, you're looking at a wild value spike. These aren't common errors. They're buried deep in circulation, often mistaken as wear or damage. But if spotted by an expert, that coin could be worth up to $380,000 in pristine, uncirculated condition. Let that sink in. One penny from 1930, worth more than a 4-bedroom home. Even in circulated condition, like the one we're looking at now, where the colors turned chocolate brown and the details are fading, if that mint error is visible, you could still be staring at a 5-figure payday. Some well-preserved circulated versions with rare features have sold for $10,000 to $40,000. So what should you be checking for? First, the date, 1930. Next, look below it. Do you see a small D or S? That's key. Now take out a magnifying glass. Is the mint mark doubled, crooked, or slightly raised? That's not damage, that's a repunched mint mark. Check for die cracks, off-center strikes, or even lamination errors, which look like peeling surfaces. Each of these quirks turns an average penny into a collector's dream. What makes this so exciting is that 1930 pennies are still relatively easy to find in estate collections, tucked inside old war ration books, or resting at the bottom of mason jars passed down through families. And most people have no idea. Imagine the rush, finding a coin like this, realizing it's not worth 1 cent, but hundreds of thousands. That's not just collecting, that's treasure hunting. So the next time you hear someone say, it's just... All right, now here's where things get really interesting. We're going all the way back to a year when Babe Ruth was stinted that year between Philadelphia, Denver, D, and San Francisco, S. But with high speed came high risk. And that's when the errors slipped in. One of the most coveted varieties of all Lincoln cents is found in this exact year, the 1917 doubled die obverse. This is not a mild error. We're talking extreme, visible doubling in the date, the words "In God We Trust," and "Liberty." You don't need a microscope. You just need to look closely. Now here's where things heat up. The blackened tone of your coin, if it wasn't caused by fire or chemicals, but instead by oxidation of a high-tin bronze planchet, then you may have a coin struck on experimental metal or from a flawed batch of alloy, both of which are known to exist for 1917. Some of these coins darkened over time due to their chemical makeup, not damage. And that odd shade, that spooky black, can make collectors go wild. Why? Because most people mistake it for junk and throw it away. That makes surviving examples nearly impossible to find. One authenticated 1917 double die in dark patinated bronze, even in circulated condition with wear and rim fading, sold for over $87,000. But here's the part that'll stop your heart. A similar coin, also with heavy black toning, also 1917, also with a dramatic obverse doubling, but in slightly better shape, fetched a stunning $606,000 at auction. Yes, over $500,000. For a penny that most people wouldn't even notice. So, how do you tell if your 1917 black penny is the jackpot? Here's what to look for. Obverse, front, doubling. Clear, strong doubling on Liberty or In God We Trust. It should look like a shadow is behind each letter. The number 7 in 1917 often shows heavy doubling or a slight notch at the top. Mint marked check. If there's a D or S, that limits the double die potential, but errors still exist. Philly, no mint mark. Moving on. We're stepping into one of the most thoughtful, overlooked years in coin collecting history, 1965. Now take a look at this one, a simple, circulated 1965 Lincoln Memorial penny. At first glance, nothing special, right? It's got wear, dings, some dirt lodged around the edges. It looks like the kind of coin that's been sitting in a coffee can for decades, forgotten. But here's the part that will, surprised, blow your mind. Some 1965 pennies, even in circulated condition, have sold for over $700,000. Yes, $700,000. For a penny that most people wouldn't even stoop to pick up off the sidewalk. So what makes the 1965 penny such a hidden time bomb? Let's dive into a wild moment in American minting history. In the mid-60s, the U.S. Mint was in a state of dramatic chaos. Silver prices were skyrocketing. Coin shortages were spreading. So in 1965, the Mint stopped placing mint marks on all coins to prevent hoarding and confusion. That means your 1965 penny will have no D or S, no matter where it was made. Millions were produced. Over 1.5 billion Lincoln cents rolled out that year. But in the rush, a few very strange things happened. First, the planchette errors. A handful of 1965 Lincoln pennies were accidentally struck on silver dime planchettes. That's right, a penny design printed on a silver blank meant for a dime. These coins weigh less than a regular penny, have a bright silvery hue, and sound different when dropped. One of these shocking errors, found in pocket change, sold for a jaw-dropping $705,000 at auction. Another 1965 penny, in condition. It's dull, soft to the touch, worn down by decades of life in pockets, purses, and drawers. Nothing flashy, no luster, just another old Lincoln wheat cent, right? Think again. because the 1946 penny has one of the most shocking backstories in coin collecting, and a handful of rare survivors from this very year have been sold for nearly $900,000. Yes, you heard that right. This dusty little coin has touched the edge of $1 million. Let's rewind the clock. It's 1946. World War II has just ended, America is rebuilding, and the U.S. Mint is shifting production back to peacetime standards. In 1943, pennies were made from steel coated in zinc, the famous Steelies. In 1944, they switched back to using copper. But with millions of leftover planchets and metal blanks scattered across mint facilities, mistakes were bound to happen. And 1946? That's when the chaos hit. The first big shocker, a 1946 D penny struck on a 1943 steel planchet. It looks like a silvery dime, shiny, magnetic, and completely out of place for the year. This error was so rare that for decades, collectors believed it didn't exist. But one surfaced. Then another. In 2021, one of these steel strike 1946 D pennies sold for $912,000. From 1 cent to nearly $1 million. Another legendary anomaly? The 1946 S over D mint mark error. Some pennies minted in San Francisco accidentally used dies that had a Denver D mint mark that was later punched over with an S. Look closely under the date, and you might see the faint ghost of a D hiding beneath the S. Even in circulated shape, these varieties have sold for over $45,000 because so few exist, and they're incredibly hard to spot. But it doesn't stop there. 1946 was also a hotbed year for foreign planchet errors. A few Lincoln cents were struck on leftover blanks meant for Belgian 2 franc pieces or Peruvian coins, thinner, off-color, and usually lighter in weight. These errors were often discarded, melted, or simply overlooked as damaged. But if you've got a 1946 penny that looks too thin, weighs under 3 grams, or has a strange silvery or pale bronzedom color, you might be holding one of these accidental strikes. One of these coins, authenticated with full detail still visible despite circulation, sold for $138,000. Let that sink in. Even beat-up 1946 pennies, if struck on the wrong metal or with a rare minting mistake, can now buy you a house. Here's what you should inspect. Check the date, 1946 only. Look for odd colors, steel gray, nickel tone, or anything that isn't that deep brown copper. Weigh the coin. It should be about 3.11 grams. If it's around